Then I had right like 2.5 weeks before I was attacked like that, and I did not know it was coming. I had this dream on August the 26th of 2020 before Trump had the stolen and all that. 34 moons. It was Trump and 34 moons, and I wrote it down. And I'll probably put an insert here where you can see. This is like the rough draft note, just for kind of like proof of how rough draft I made myself a note um, of things that happened to me on that time frame. And I have a note on there of what happened to me in 2018 with some. I think part of the warfare of trying to make me not write that book was I kept having dental issues. So that's part of my notes that I kept on my important notes. But Trump and 34 moons, and when I had that dream, I realized it was one of the important information dreams I was getting, and wrote it down. And then I got so sick I couldn't even think about what it might mean because I was attacked. So anyway, the interesting part though is that if you count 34 moons from when Trump was elected this time, if you look at the new moons, then that puts you I think it's August, September, October of 2027, which is 7 years since I was attacked. And that just leads to a 7 year pattern that's pretty precise, plus when I was attacked. Another way you could look at that that's very interesting, that may be even more what it actually meant. If you count 34 full moons from the time I had that dream, that is the time that Trump entered the lawfare. That's when it was the historic indictments for the felony charges, was 34 moons later to the moon. And then that next month, like if you were going to make sure if there was some leeway in there of like, do you count the moon that came right then or do you count that next moon? The next month after that, Trump was having I forget exactly what that was, but that was their next big lawfare. That was happening in those 2 months. So that was another direct 34 moons later, he's in lawfare. So, in case. But hopefully that's all it is. I don't want to say, guys, I'll get into that later in the video. 34 moons into Trump's presidency, we need to be careful as America. Let's just leave it there because that's scary. But, okay, guys, I decided to get a little bit deeper into this part of the video because I plan on covering this in depth later, but it may take me a minute to get to it, to get to more videos. And so also, since I made this video, I discovered even more information about my dream of Trump and 34 moons. And I think it's time to start discussing this in depth. It may take me another month or two to get to more of my videos, so I definitely want to start discussing this now that I discovered new information on my dream since I started making these videos. So I want to just cover the information that I have pretty quick on my dream of Trump and 34 moons. And I put a chart up here that we can look at. I'll explain the chart briefly. If you look from left to right, 2020 to 2030 is going to be our Black Horse decade, potentially. I'm also open to a theory that I'm not understanding these cycles perfectly because some of them seem to have started on like 2001, 2011, and maybe they're also shortened in some ways. Like maybe our 7 year marker on this decade, parts of that may be seen more like in 2026 because possibly the virus beginning would have been 2019. I was looking for something like that to begin 2020 to 2021, but it could have been 2019. Our 7 year markers may begin next year, 2026, but I'm still looking at 2027 for some specific information. Okay, so I had the dream of Trump and 34 moons, and I was counting those moons, and I decided that in order to try to measure the moons, if that's what this means, and if that's what we're looking at, that I need to look at the new moons and not the calendar months, possibly. I haven't really studied the calendar months, maybe I should, but I opened up some information on the approximate new moons, 2020 to 2023. First, I was looking at, let's go back to our chart. Okay, so I divided it up. From left to right, you can see that I had my dream in August of 2020. I was attacked 9/11 of September 2020. I believe that was a sign. So, since I had my dream like 2.5 weeks before I was attacked, this is what I'm starting to think, guys. I'm starting to think it was a big deal. It was ugly. It was brutal. So, if it's being used for a sign, I believe, just like some of the signs that God gave in the Bible, like John the Baptist's father could not speak until he was born, that God is showing all the details of the sign, if you will. He's giving me all the information that I'm going to need and other people are going to need. If it's this important, it's for a lot of people. For example, if it's beginning on September the 11th of 2020, that's the beginning of the sign. And I'm starting to think my dream of Trump and 34 moons, it did not impact me in like a great, amazing way, but I do believe it was information. And I still get dreams with specific information. It's usually for some kind of information for my life, for me. But I knew it was important. I wrote it down. I kept track of the information. I'm starting to think that God wanted me to know, because this attack is so terrible, like for my own peace. He wanted me to know, like the beginning and the end of it, if you will. The purpose of it, the beginning and the end of it. And I think that came with the dream, this dream about the 34 moons, because it's showing me the end of the attack. And I think the reason that God gave me a major sign at 1260 days, or the 3.5 years, is He's letting me know that this is a 7-year ordeal. And it may not be your exact 1260 plus 1260. I haven't looked at that part yet. There's a lot of different ways to analyze a lot of this, and I don't spend a lot of time on it just as I'm inspired. For example, I knew of this dream. Like every time I looked at my paper with my important information on it, I would go over it to see what I could delete that was outdated. But I would, of course, always keep the information about this dream until, I knew that it had been fulfilled. I could delete it. And I didn't really pay it a lot of attention or even ask about it until recently. Why would my mind start asking about this dream recently, as in the past few months? Why would that happen? And I think it's because it's now important and it's now going to matter. Like, there's no sense in me thinking about it for 5 straight years, but in the next 2 years, it will be important for me to start looking at it and understanding, and for a lot of people to understand and prepare, possibly. I'm telling you guys, for some reason, it was just time to look at this dream after what, 5 years, almost 4.5 years, maybe. Suddenly it's time to look at this dream. I'm telling you, I have not had the urge to think about it or look into it until now. And so immediately what came to mind was, I did not know that Trump was going to be elected a second time. I just knew that the election was stolen from him. That was pretty obvious. And that now that it's obvious that he's been elected a second time, my immediate thought was count 34 moons from that, from the start time. And I just shared this with someone else, and they were like, they immediately went to, what if this is something major for Trump in 34 months into his presidency? So please be in prayer for our leaders, guys, and for the very best outcome for all of us, for them, and for all of us. This hopefully does not mean any kind of doom for him or his family, as much as I think we need to be aware as a nation something might come to America. 34 moons. So if you look back at this chart, I've mapped my dream, the 9/11 attack. My dream might have been telling me the outcome of this attack, the 7 years, because if you count 34 moons from the time that Trump was elected or inaugurated, then that gives you the fall of 2027, which, what is the coincidence that that will be 7 years from when I was attacked? Like, it's kind of like this coming on to me was a bad portend, if you will. It was a bad sign. I was given a sign. I was given the understanding of 3.5 years. Something did happen at 3.5 years. I'm thinking 7 years is an alert and a warning, and will probably be the end. Like, this would be a sign of symbolizing a 7-year tribulation time period. So, of course, I have a midway marker point on the chart here. I have the 7-year mark at 2027, and Trump was elected right before a midway point. I have the 1260 day point somewhere a little after 2024. 1260 from my attack. That was like 3.5 years. And then another marker I have on here is a little after 2023 because I started thinking, why would I only measure 34 moons from when Trump was elected into office the second time? Why would I do just that? There could be other meanings, and I'm trying to relate it to Trump, right? So, what I did is I decided to count 34 new moons from the time that I had the dream and then to see what was happening in the world. And so, what I did there was I opened up the new moons, and the first one I'm seeing is on August the 27th, by the way. And it's funny that I had a dream on August 26th. So, I counted 34 new moons and I came all the way to 34 is almost 3 years. I came all the way into like around May the 19th of 2023. So I did a search on what was happening with Trump in the world on May of 2023. And what I found was 34 count felony conviction for Trump. And I realized, okay, 34 moons after I have the dream, Trump is entering into heavy lawfare. And by the way, these are the only ones that were never dismissed from him. These were the only indictments that were never dismissed. Everything's been postponed because he's obviously elected. But these were the 34. And I didn't think about that number at the time, right? I didn't think about that till a little while later. I was just like, okay, he's coming under lawfare 34 months after I have the dream. He's entering lawfare. So there is something big in the world exactly 34 months even after I have the dream. And that's when he actually had the conviction. So it was getting serious. He had other things coming along the same time frame. But this was the actual lawfare after he has the election stolen. So, in other words, Trump and his team and his family are entering into a severe distress 34 months after I have the 34 moon dream. And then I realized later, what is the odds? What are the odds that 34 months before he is convicted for 34 counts, I have a dream of Trump and 34 moons? That is a lot of 34s. So I'm taking that as very possibly the only thing that the dream might have meant. The only thing it might have meant, if anything, was the lawfare. Maybe that's all it was. Maybe that's it. But it's also could be the 34 months and the 34 counts could be confirming that the dream was serious. And it could mean more things. So, what are also the odds, right? And guys, I have been just violently assaulted on 9/11. It's not a joke. I had other things to do with North America. Like I've said a lot of times that, whenever they passed the Marriage Act and something happened to me deep in the spirit there, God was talking to me. So I'm concerned that this may be talking about America going under the pale horse and the confirmation of us going cashless in the black horse, just for your own information. But this dream, 34 moons, 34 felonies, could be pointing to the dream is confirmed. Therefore, what are also the odds that 34 new moons, I calculated those new moons also from Trump's inauguration and his election, 34 moons from Trump being elected puts you to the fall of 2027. And the some ways you can look at it, it's putting you really close to September of 2027. And that gives exactly 7 years from my attack. So what would be the odds I would have this dream and it would give you 7 years from the time I'm attacked to the ending of the sign or the ending of the dream, if you will? What are the odds of that 34 panning out that way? So, like I said, heaven forbid anything happen to our leaders, but this kind of gives you possibly a confirmation of my dream already, and then it's looking forward to a fulfillment of this sign because something really big did happen here. It's ridiculous. This is very, very difficult, like ridiculous. I know a lot of people have gone through a whole lot in this season, some worse than me. But I don't think this was for nothing, and I think I was shown this season was coming, and this is what this decade is. And I'm not worthy of any of it because we're not worthy to look on the seals of the scroll. But I think this is pointing towards some things. It's meant for a warning to as many people as possible, I do believe. So yes, I'm looking at the fall of 2027. That's possibly when the big things will happen for America. I am concerned everyone's looking that a Pearl Harbor will pull us into a world war situation, another Pearl Harbor for America, or a planned incident, if you will. And they already did try to do one for Trump. I hate to say it, guys. Pray for this man and pray for his safety and his life in the name of Jesus. But he seems to be going around trying to make a whole lot of peace and interrupt plans for war. So you can see what I'm talking about, what I'm concerned about. And a big enough thing happened to me that I'm kind of responsible to share this information. I'm responsible to share it, not to keep it hidden. So that's why I'm sharing this, and hopefully this chart is helpful. And please add your comments and concerns if you have any about this or your information. I know not a lot of people are watching my channel right now, at least not publicly. And there was a reason I was slam shut down before. I was knowing and saying too much. Another thing that kind of goes hand in hand with this is Mike from Around the World, Thursday nights, Paul Begley YouTube channel, and other places. He said he had big dreams about America, and he might start getting quiet about his dreams too, because even though he's very well known, I'm sure he's kind of known in the intelligence community, they would know that he's not planning something evil. So he would have a safety in speaking, but he has talked about seeing a person that was in a coffin, and recently he admitted it was an American. And he's had like three main dreams that I've followed for years, and I have followed them long enough to watch two of them happen. One of them happen and one of them start happening. And he is a Hebrew from my understanding, and the oracles do come through the Hebrews. And sometimes I think that's for good and for bad, but I think he's being used because he has a great audience and he's given special information. And so that's another warning that I take, because he said that whenever this person is in the coffin, it begins a very terrible time for America. And there's a lot of people very upset, inconsolably upset, and it is a big change in the world. And so that would be a possible, even if what I'm saying about my dream is nothing. The Bible speaks about out of the mouth of two or three witnesses let a thing be established, and that before he does a thing, he will show it to his servants. So I'm kind of wondering if that's what's happening. The biggest thing I'm concerned about here is even if this has nothing to do with Trump's personal life or his family, if it's someone else, if it's another American, and if it's a big change of America because of a Pearl Harbor, that's the exact season we are in. We're in the season of multiple Pearl Harbors. And the reason I'm concerned that America will go under the pale horse by 2030 or shortly thereafter, and that may be the beginning of a 7-year tribulation or maybe not. And the reason I'm concerned about that is we're the number one target that must be subjugated in order for the plans to go forward. I'm still looking for a grid down scenario in which the AI will come out the hero. That would be the excuse to give everything over to the hero. And we would hopefully come out from under this hacking or grid down pretty quickly. But that would be the perfect excuse, because I stopped saying that they would do a virus on the computer systems, because at first the World Economic Forum was saying virus on the bodies, virus on the computer system. And so I thought that's probably the order, and it makes perfect sense. Well, I quit saying that once they came with AI. I said, okay, they're just going to do it through AI. So hopefully they're going to do it a more peaceful way. But now I'm realizing they could still do the virus or the so-called warfare on the computer systems. They could still do that, because that would be the perfect excuse to hand everything over to the AI systems as designed. A lot of ways these things could go. These were the conversations we were having before the virus, of how are they going to do it. And so when the virus came, we were like, yep, that's one of the perfect constitutional loopholes, is health care at that level. And that's how they did it. At least that's how they did this stage of it, because everyone was looking at grid down, world war, or bio. And so when bio came, we were like, welp, that's the first one they chose. So we're still having those conversations now. This is a time to be in a whole lot of prayer. That's what I would emphasize the most from this. So I believe that many people witnessed my attack, guys, not just people in my community. A lot of people witnessed it and or made a note of it, what it could mean, watching, making sure, in case the Lord uses me this way again. So there's people in my local community that think I'm horrible and all kind of horrible things, but then there's other people that are like, I'm gonna watch and see if God uses her for another sign, because that's historically the role that I would play in a country is I would be an advisor to the leaders, or I would be the one that would pray to God for them of what's coming and where we're at. But they won't these days. These days they don't care. They ain't listening. They don't care. It's like, oh, she said the revelation was true. That off with her head, real quick. John the Baptist style. It's coming anyway. Anyway, so I believe there's many witnesses to with many different uh reactions to me. So I think some people was like, well, I don't know exactly what happened there with her and this preacher, but something happened and he probably attacked her. So they don't know it, I'm just trying to be as clear as I can. So maybe people will understand whatever they need to about it. So another thing is I was getting off of that channel. I was ending my little Bible studies. I had put Hebrew and Revelations together and I was getting really blessed by it. But my part was I'm going to end my little channel, my Bible studies, and I'm going to go home. I'm going to have some time. I'm going to rest. And I'm going to get ready for the Lord to come back. And it's just me and Jesus and the Lord. I wasn't planning on none of this to happen. And I didn't make it happen. I didn't want it to happen. And it wasn't on purpose. So I never wanted to be a messenger or anything like that. I didn't see it. I didn't do that on purpose at all. And I didn't want that to happen. That was not my plan. So. Okay, now we're getting into the part where we're talking about this webinar that Paul Begley Prophecy.com did in early of 2025.